this point, anyone with half a brain would have questions. Questions like, how am I going to get out of this mess? Where did that Airsoft RPG come from? Who is the Muffin Man? Is water wet? How far can you walk in another man's shoes? Or woman's shoes? Well, luckily, I have the knowledge, skills, and equipment to handle just about any situation in the wide world of Airsoft. And as you just saw, I now have the last piece of my Matrix RPG Airsoft grenade launcher. But not everyone can be as Airsoft prepared as I always am. And what if you had all the parts to an Airsoft RPG but lacked the knowledge to assemble it?
Don't worry, kid. Illinois Johnson's got you covered.
And when you get one of these things, it comes in a box, like this. Unfortunately, these don't come with a map, so I guess I'm going to be your guide. The first step of the assembly process is to separate all the different parts of the launcher and spread them out like I have here. The first part we'll put together is the central receiver. To attach the handle, you'll need the small bag of screws marked D. Place the handle over the matching threaded holes on the thicker end of the receiver. The handle should be closer to the end of the receiver, oriented away from the rear sight. Use a hex key to tighten these screws down all the way. Now, let's install the trigger group. You'll need the bag labeled Ring A and a small bag labeled Screw B. First, take a look at the two rings. You'll notice that the hole drilled in the flat tabs is off-center. When you put these rings on, you must make sure that these holes face away from each other. Slide the rings over the receiver tube as shown. Then, turn the receiver upside down and put the trigger group into the slot on the underside of the receiver. Orient the trigger group so that the trigger faces away from the other grip and toward the thinner end of the receiver. Use the nuts and bolts in the small bag to secure these rings and the trigger group together. Tighten them all the way. A pair of pliers will help you hold these small nuts in place while you tighten the bolts. Alright, next we're going to assemble the back end of the RPG launcher, starting with the tube section that is covered by the imitation wood heat shield. You'll need the bags labeled Ring B, Ring C, and Screw C. The heat shield consists of two halves of plastic held together by three metal bands. Before putting that together, it's recommended that you connect the inner metal tube to the receiver. It does not matter which end screws into place, as both have identical threading. Once the metal tube is connected tightly into place, the two halves of the heat shield can be placed over it. Orient these pieces so that the thicker portion faces the receiver. The largest ring goes around the heat shield close to the receiver in the groove. Use one of the screws to connect the ring back to itself. Note that the tabs on the rings are shaped differently. At the end that is doubled over like a U is the one that the screw threads into, so make sure you start by inserting the screw from the tab that is not doubled over. Repeat this process for the two smaller rings around the narrower portion of the heat shield. Again, tighten down securely. Next, the blast cone. This step requires the remaining rings labeled Ring D and Ring E. Take the ring marked Ring D and place it into the groove behind the threads. Use the included screw to connect the two ends of the ring and tighten securely. This is a sling loop and may need future adjusting to fit your preferences. Then, take the other ring in the bag, Ring E, and place it over the threaded portion of the cone. Make sure the flat face of this ring goes towards the fake wood heat shield. This part acts as a shim to help hold the heat shield in place. Then, carefully thread the blast cone into the open end of the tube with the heat shield. Tighten this all the way down. The last piece that needs assembly is the base of the warhead. Take the part of the warhead with the long stick and insert it into the front of the tube. Make sure it's oriented so that the slot cut on the bottom of the warhead orients the same way as the trigger group. This part allows the hammer to push the plunger in the back of the warhead. Once this is inserted, take the final remaining screw marked Screw A and thread it into the corresponding holes in the receiver and the mock warhead. This holds the back half of the warhead in place. Finally, the front part of the warhead is where the 40mm airsoft grenade shell should be placed. We recommend only using shower grenade shells for this RPG launcher. The grenade is simply placed into the warhead and then attached to the rest of the launcher with a twist, securing the locking lugs of the two halves together. There is a manual cross-bolt safety on the trigger group to prevent negligent discharging of this airsoft replica. There's also a small metal cap that goes into the muzzle end of the replica. Do not attempt to fire the replica with this cap in place, as it may damage the replica. This metal cap is only for show and should be removed before use.
See? It wasn't that hard after all. We've got some unfinished business to take care of. Come on. Well, kid, now that you got the right tools, the right education, you ready for any airsoft adventure? Like me.